Hey, this is author A.L.McCarroll, and I am coming at you again from my desk in my room, where I've been recording chapter by chapter of the first book of my Into the Void trilogy, The Pawn. And this week we will be doing chapter 14, and I will soon be doing an overview of the previous week's chapter, chapter 13. So if you have not already, and this is the first video that you've come across, please go back to my channel and maybe start from the first one so you can not find any kind of spoilers, especially this late in the game, because there's only 18 of these chapters. So chapter 14, it's getting pretty close to the end here, and it's pretty cool. And you know, I was not entirely comfortable doing this kind of stuff at first, but over the time I feel like I've really grown and become less nervous of doing these kind of things like these recordings. And if you had told me a year ago that I'd be doing this, I would just be like, oh my God, no, I'm gonna have a complete panic attack and fall apart and be super nervous. But, see, I've grown as a person as I've been doing these, and, I'm proud of myself. And I might keep doing this, maybe for like book 2 and 3. Who knows? We'll see if the people are interested. And, well, let's get that overview going. So, chapter 13, the previous week's chapter, you get to see a little bit more of what the Baron and Doc are up to, and you also get to see the conversations between him and Dr. Daisy Ray, and kind of her playing the in-between for Guinevere and him. And also, you get to see the final messages of Robert Higgins. And if you have the physical copy of the book, some of Robert Higgins' messages have codes in them. So it's like the first letter of each word ends up spelling stuff out. And those things will be answered in book 3. So, I mean, you don't actually have to find the message, but I put it in there because I was always such a big nerd of Edgar Allan Poe when I was a kid, and he put secret messages into some of his poetry, and it was always like the first letter of the stanza that would end up spelling out stuff. So I always thought that was the coolest thing, and I wanted to put it into this first book. I put a lot of important things to me into these books. So that was just one little bit. And I thought I'd let y'all know about it. And last little bit about how life's been going. It's been going. Not a whole lot happening right now. It's getting closer and closer to Halloween. I'm enjoying my pumpkin spice and my fall time, and we had a little bit of cold, and then it got warmer, and it's back and forth, and everybody's kind of trying to get sick still, so just dealing with that as best as possible. All right, and with that, let's get this thing started. Chapter 14. Guinevere jumped up and down, as much as possible with the heavy gun slung across her shoulder. Yes! As she jumped, the weapon moved along with her, causing it to bump roughly into her stomach. Oh! Daisy chuckled as Guinevere hunched over from the pain in her gut. Your sling's too loose, Miss Matthews. Let me help you get adjusted. Blust rushed forward to help her. Lately, she had been calling him by his first name, Brett. With all the time he had spent around Daisy, she had begun to see him as somewhat of a friend. He had been showing her how to correctly use the weapon, since she had never formally been trained. Brett, you can call me Gwen. It's not like I don't see you all the time lately. Guinevere enjoyed picking on him. Brett still treated her like a guillotine that could chop his head off at any moment. It had become a treat to mess with him. She found it funny that such a tall, muscular man would be fearful of someone as petite as herself. I'll work on it, Gwen. She frowned at him. You make my name sound absolutely toxic. He looked shocked and began to sputter. I didn't mean to offend you, ma'am. Daisy chimed in. coming to his rescue. "Leave him alone, Gwen. You're being a meanie." She did her best to look taken aback. "A meanie? How mature of you, Dr. Ray." They both cracked up, beginning to laugh, leaving Brett looking back and forth between them in confused consternation. She had nearly perfected the gun. This was the fifth incarnation. She needed to create an extra thick shielding to coat the muzzle so it might dissipate some of the excess of heat made up by the powerful beam that came from the crystals. It also could only be used in small bursts and not continually, so the muzzle would have time to cool off. The practice room was fitted with thick metal box for her to shoot into. All this work would be worth it once could take Avenger down. "So, now that you have the weapon, when are we going to go to Prime?" Daisy asked, having calmed down and gotten back to business. "I rushed into things before when I went to the Church of the Shard. I'm going to take more time to plan this out." Guinevere turned towards Brett. "Hey, Brett, I need you to get a group of guards together to participate in this mission. It will be dangerous, so make sure they know that." "Can do, ma'am. Gwen." She shot him a friendly smile. Brett was trying, and he made Daisy happy, so that was enough for her to approve of him. "Does he have to go?" Daisy had broken her thoughts with her tentative question. If he gets enough other people together." Daisy looked worriedly over Brett, who took her hands in his. "I already told you I'm going. I'm not the kind of man that backs down when there's something important to do." Daisy looked at him with pleading eyes, and when he didn't give in, she became angry. "Fine, go. If you die on me, I will be devastated, and that will be on you." Brett smiled as he wrapped her in a big hug and whispered things Guinevere couldn't hear into Daisy's ear. She turned away, feeling awkward at witnessing their moment. Guinevere thought quickly of Marcus. Would he have treated her the same way in this situation? She brushed off the thought. "I'll see you ladies later." Brett gave Daisy a quick kiss before walking out of the room. Daisy's gaze lingered on the door after he left, and Guinevere broke the silence. "You two make a good couple." Daisy turned back, and Guinevere saw her eyes were red and puffy from the tears rolling down her cheeks. Daisy rubbed her eyes and smiled weakly. "Yeah, I think I actually love him, Gwen, so try not to get him killed." Once Guinevere had returned to her office, she planned to call her parents and tell them about the weapon and their upcoming plans on Planet Prime. She knew the upcoming mission would be extremely dangerous. Guinevere hoped that by telling them, she wasn't subjecting them to any more worry over her. Guinevere hated putting them in hazardous situations and thought about not telling them, but she knew that was her bad habit of pushing the people closest to her away when things got too scary. She was actively working on trying not to do that anymore. The interplanetary shuttle going to Planet Prime took off from the launch center in Newer York. The megalopolis became as tiny as a snow globe version Guinevere had once seen in a souvenir shop. It had little stars that would float above it on a top layer of oil that was dyed black like the blanket of space. She stood by the window watching the stars as they passed by the space shuttle. Guinevere was reminded of her interaction with Marcus when they had made the journey to Titania, when they had talked while looking at the stars together. She had told him that his parents would be proud of him for getting a place within the Gwentech company. He had said to her that his parents had both already passed. Guinevere still couldn't imagine what she would do without her parents. They were the two closest people she had in her life. "Really? You moved them nearly to the other side of the world, just like you pushed away Marcus," her thoughts nagged at her. She sighed heavily, not wanting to have these kind of thoughts, but knowing she had been brushing them off for a long time. Guinevere passively ran her fingertips over her bottom lip as she continued her negative thoughts. "You do care about Marcus. You've been missing him. It's all very similar to how you treated your parents. You're happy with how it turned out for Marcus because you can keep him safe from Avenger, but it's not fair to treat him or your parents that way." Guinevere knew it was all true. She decided once the mission was over and Avenger was dead, she would finally do something to bring everyone she cared for closer to herself. Guinevere would finally be done pushing people away. Brett had built a team of 8, including himself, Daisy, and Guinevere. He had convinced 5 others, including Security Chief Laureate, who had trained Brett. Maxim, the younger man with similar hair, skin, and eye colors. Also 3 other guards, a chunky man named Fletcher, a woman with long wavy brown hair named Robertson, and a friend of his, a buff man named Ryle. She had taken time to research the underground bunkers on her comm. Robert had noted in his journal that the one they were looking for would have Avenger's eye painted on its door. She had found information on it surprisingly fast. It was the only bunker community that was still locked down. The people who had lived there were originally from the harsh desert of planet Darlene. They had been locked into their bunker and could never come out to help build the first city. She shuddered at the thought. More bodies for Avenger to make use of. She had a few scars on her ankle. They were from where the Avenger-inhabited corpse of the child in the underground church had scratched her. However, her leg had healed up enough for her to be able to walk again. Everyone on this mission had been briefed on what they would be doing. Beforehand, they had signed a standard non-disclosure agreement. A couple of people refused, and they were reassigned to another part of the company. Guinevere had been worried about them spreading the information, but Daisy had soothed her worries. "It's their word against Guinevere Matthews. You've got this." The rest of the group fell in line, and if they had doubts about her sanity, they kept them hidden. Planet Darlene still amazed her every time she witnessed it from space. Most of the world was a vast, unused red desert landscape marked with a few small blue water masses. The inhabited part of Prime was a colossal metal city, levels stretching up in a cylinder shape that took up a considerable portion of one side of the planet. The side experiencing night was lit by bright city lights stretching out like a glittering intricate web. The side of the vast construction bathed in daylight had an overwhelming gray tone to its vibrant layers. They descended into one of the massive cities on the night side of the world. The top layer of the world had always been named the surface. They docked and exited the ship. According to what Guinevere had looked into about the bunker, their group would need to walk the city streets for a few blocks before they came to the elevator they needed to reach it. They would be taking the 97th elevator down to the Undercity, the ground level of the massive cylinder-shaped city world. According to her previous research, the elevator would put them near the locked bunker. The surface was a maze of metal and concrete. The streets were endless and smelled like body sweat, food, and always a tiny bit of garbage. Buildings rose oppressively overhead and connected to each other in a web. Guinevere could see that the next layer of the world was well underway. What will they name the surface layer once this one is covered up? Guinevere's thoughts were broken by a mint-green woman approaching her from the large, colorful crowd of altered locals. The stranger spoke in a rushed, excited tone. "Oh my gosh, you're actually Guinevere Matthews, right?" She smiled back. "Yes, I am." The mint-green woman looked her over in awe. "Wow, I never thought I'd actually get to meet you. Can I get a picture with you?" Guinevere nodded. "Sure, go ahead." The mint-green woman stood close as she rolled up the sleeve of her white shirt to show a comm that had a wrap the same color of her skin, giving it a look of a screen floating on her wrist. As the woman leaned in close and took the picture, Guinevere noticed it wasn't a wrap. The G-comm was actually embedded into her skin. "Your comm?" Guinevere asked. The woman looked at her curious expression and answered quickly, "Oh yeah, I got it embedded. It's the hottest new body mod trend. I'm glad you like it." The woman then walked away into the colorful, bustling crowd. Guinevere was left with more questions than answers, and she wasn't sure if she did like the body modification. It wasn't something she would want to do to her body, but some of the altered body modifications really did amaze her. Anyone that wasn't altered stood out among the colorful crowds. Their group surely did, as they continued moving down the blocks towards the elevator. The surface was a tourist area, where visitors enjoyed the nightlife and mingled with altered humans. But then the other layers became more dangerous. Guinevere had heard about gangs and black market activity suspected to be coming from the middle layer, the Black Light District. She hoped they would avoid problems like those while down in the deepest layer. The elevator was large enough to hold a single space shuttle. The group moved into a line and waited for people to disembark from the metal plate. She passively counted how many people were getting off. 73. And it wasn't even packed. Finally, the line began to move. Guinevere picked up a heavy case she kept next to her. This case held the parts of the gun. Once they reached the bunker, she planned to assemble it. They couldn't openly carry their weapons on the surface. They each toted bags and hard cases. As they filed into the elevator, Guinevere heard a metallic scraping sound that set off her nerves as they descended. She wished she could see the layers as they moved downward, but the way this elevator was designed, she could only see and smell the other people squeezed around her. They were crowded, and the air was stuffy. The light around them grew dimmer as they got further down. The lights on the other layers became entirely artificial and very expensive to run. They stopped at the Blacklight District, and the elevator let off many people from their bunch. More people loaded on, and she noticed a unique woman near their group. The woman was a pink-skinned altered, but she had odd splotches of light blue that speckled what skin was visible in her showy outfit. She had never seen a multicolored altered in all the time she had worked on the planet. The procedure they underwent usually just left them with a single hereditary color. The tech was not advanced enough to allow recipients a choice of color. She had heard that a small percentage of abnormal reactions to the chemical change did result in multicolor skin tones. A popular band named Duality, that Daisy was into when they were teenagers, had a singer with red and blue splotched skin. She smiled as she remembered how much of a crush Daisy had on that man. "Gwen, look at her!" Daisy nudged her excitedly, and Guinevere whispered in a rapid reply, "Yeah, I've never seen a multicolored altered in person." Daisy looked the woman over with admiration in her gaze. "Her colors are so pretty," she spoke enviously. Then, as if the woman could hear their hushed conversation, she casually looked over her shoulder and blew a kiss to them. Daisy quickly looked away, blushing. The pink and blue speckled woman caught Guinevere's eye. She looked as if she had recognized her, and as she did, the altered woman casually turned away, keeping herself to herself once more. After a while, the elevator finally stopped in the Undercity. The ground the elevator opened onto was made of crushed red sandstone instead of metal. The bright red material was the only part of the construction that showed what might be outside of the surrounding walls that enclosed them inside. The layer was dark, nearly pitch black, beyond a few artificial spotlights along each metal pillar that held up the higher levels. Each building had its own spotlight to show where each front was located. The ground had obvious dirt paths winding through the red sandstone, leading towards industrial buildings and long unused bunkers. Prime citizens filed out of the elevator, and she noticed most that left were wearing maintenance jumpsuits. They must be an upkeep group for this level, she thought. The multicolored altered woman stayed as their group left the elevator. Guinevere took one last look at her as they walked past. She had just pulled out a thin black cigarette out from a pack and lit it off of the end of her finger, which sparked a small flame. "Now that's a useful body modification," she mused, as she passed by the woman and exited out into the Undercity. They walked the main red sand path, noticing several large dome-shaped bunkers mixed between buildings that filtered water and waste. Guinevere glanced at the door of each bunker, trying to see if she could see the one with the eye painted on the front. So far she had seen nothing but plain metal doors. "Hey, I need to ask a question if you got time." She turned her attention to Laureate, who had pulled aside an electric yellow man wearing a jumpsuit. "Sure," the altered man replied with an air of friendliness. "What'd you need to ask?" Laureate cleared his throat before he continued. "I wanted to know where the bunker with the eye painted on it is." The altered man he spoke to had an abrupt shift in attitude. "So, you're some of those people?" Laureate's eyes narrowed as he repeated the word slowly. "Those people?" The altered man eyed him with disapproval. "Yeah, treasure hunters. Looking to open the treasure chest. Your kind of people make me sick. You can't help but try and try just because it's there. No one has ever been able to open that bunker, and I don't think it should be opened. It's a grave for our ancestors." Guinevere pushed through the group to Laureate's side and put her hand on his shoulder before he could speak again. "Come on, let's go," she stated. Laureate glared at the altered man before the group continued forward. They could hear the altered man shout out from behind them, "Those people should be left to rest!" Guinevere kept walking, and as she did she saw a few other altered men and women dressed in maintenance jumpsuits. They were giving them dirty looks. Then finally Laureate spoke up to the other security guards in the group. "Okay, fellas, from now on, we keep to the group. Best to not draw any more negative attention." Guinevere heard their quiet agreement to his statement as she continued looking for bunker doors. The road curved, and as they approached the bend, she saw something that made her heart race. It was a dark eye painted on a door, but this particular eye had been one she had seen before and still had dreams about. It was a detailed painting of the dark void that was Avenger's eye. Guinevere felt her neck prickle as if it could actually see her. She knew that wasn't true, though. This was just a painting. But how could someone outside the locked bunker have painted his eye with such precise detail? "That must be it." Brett's voice came from behind her. She was still paused in shock. "Yeah, that's it." She turned and looked from the tall, muscular man over to Daisy, who gave her a look of questioning concern. "That eye? It's his eye?" Daisy looked from her to the eye, and she could see her friend's micro-expression of apprehension. "It's just a painting, Gwen." Daisy turned on her confidence, masking her fear. "Yeah, we've got your back," Brett added. The group walked up to the bunker. It had one bright outside light that flickered intermittently, adding to the eerie appearance of the giant dark eye. Guinevere located the lock panel on the left side of the door. It looked very similar in style to the door she had found in the museum with Marcus. At least she had a code this time. The building was more extensive than the small room they had broken into. This bunker could easily house a small community of at least 50 people. She pulled up a save file on her comm. She wanted to ensure she had the correct number for the door. She input the numbers 8, 2, 3, 1, and 5. Then she heard the familiar sound of the door opening. It sounded exactly the same as the bunker door in the museum. It creaked open slightly, showing a small crack into a room lit with artificial light. Guinevere turned around to the group. "We need to get our weapons ready before we go inside. We don't know what will be inside here, but it very well could be hostile, so prepare yourself for anything." The group began to arm themselves. Guinevere opened her case and put together the pieces of her gun. Laureate and Brett went in first, pushing open the door, and made a loud scraping noise that made Guinevere's ears hurt. After a short while they called out, letting the others know it was safe to enter. The rest of the group walked into the small room. It was plain, with metal from wall to door. Posters were hung on the walls, but had lost their meaning over time. The paper they had been printed on, left faded out from age. The air smelled strangely musty and sour. The small room had a door to the left of where they had come in. That door was made of thick metal with a red wheel in its center. Guinevere noticed that the red paint was chipped and fading from age. "Go on, Blust, you're a strong man," Laureate barked out and looked quiet. Brett cracked his knuckles and grabbed the wheel, giving it all of his strength. "Damn it, it's stuck!" Laureate moved forward, shoving Brett out of his way. "You have to try it with the other way around before giving up so quickly." The older man heaved up on the wheel, letting out a strained grunt as he did. It wouldn't budge. He backed away and waved another man to their group. "Come on up here, Raoul. Put those muscles to the test." The tall man with tan skin and dark hair lumbered up. He was stronger looking than the other two men combined. He smiled a silly grin at the two, and they both smirked and slightly backed away. "You ready for a real man to show you how it's done?" Raoul grabbed the wheel and began pulling it up and down with all of his strength, as if he thought he could loosen it up with the motion. The muscular man fell to the ground, and the red wheel was still in his hand. "Oh, shit, Raoul, you broke the damn door!" Laureate reprimanded him while Brett helped him up. Guinevere almost felt like she could have laughed at the whole exchange, if it wasn't for the fact that they had now made entry to the rest of the bunker impossible. Hey, this is A.L.McCarroll. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. Remember to give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, also turn on notifications so you never miss a chapter. Don't forget to follow me on my social media platforms for updates. You can find the links in the description box. Thank you again for watching. Stay tuned and take care.